Hello, Twisted Humans. This is the podcast where two best friends chat true crime and have a glass
or two
of wine. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Caitlin.
And this is Twisted and Uncorked.
So join us every week for Casual Tuesdays, where we release a new episode. We are now available on all platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. Rate, review, and subscribe.
Cheers!
Cheers!
Good evening, you're listening to the True Crime Witch podcast. I'm your host Emma, and this is the podcast that delves into everything murderous, mysterious, and downright macabre. Before we start the episode, I have just a few thank yous for my new patrons. So I have Jonathan, Eileen, Thomas Dave, Murder and Such, and Derek. So thank you so much for signing up to my Patreon and choosing to support what I do here. If you sign up to the Patreon, you'll get early access to episodes, plus exclusive content, stickers, and I also recently have some badges that I can now start sending out. So it's all very exciting, so just search for True Crime Witch on Patreon. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Denmark has a reputation for being a quiet and peaceful country. Crime just doesn't happen, especially in the small, peaceful towns like Korsør. Emilie Meng was born to Nikolai Skovgaard and Helen Meng on July 31st, 1998. Her parents divorced when she was young, and Emilie went to live with her mum and her stepdad. There isn't a whole lot of information about her childhood, and it seems that she grew up as a normal Danish kid. There are a few accounts of Emilie running away to Copenhagen, but she always returned, and this was more than likely the product of teenage angst. On July 9th into July 10th, 2016, Emilie, who was then aged 17, went for a day out with three friends to the nearby city of Slagelse. They went shopping, visited a hookah bar, and ended the night off, as many people do, in McDonald's. Slagelse is around a 21-minute drive from Korsør, according to Google Maps. There's a train service that runs every half an hour, with the journey taking anywhere between 7 and 9 minutes. If this is still correct information as of writing this episode, and at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, we can assume that Emilie and her friends boarded the train between 3:44 and 3:46 a.m. in Slagelse. The four friends all boarded the train, and they quickly noticed that Emilie had seemed to have been in a bad mood. There was clearly something that was bothering her, and in fact she'd been sort of off all day. Nicole Guncroft was one of the last people to see Emilie alive. She had been with Emilie on the trip to Slagelse and witnessed her being upset during the trip. During the time that they were in Slagelse, Emilie received a text message that had a drastic impact on her mood. According to Nicole, the text was from a boy that Emilie had been speaking to. The message had said along the lines of that he didn't want her anymore and that he was never her boyfriend, that they were just flirting and messing around. She gave an interview to the TV programme called Crimes That Shook Denmark, saying, quote, "I thought that nothing will happen. Nothing happens here," end quote. Nicole provides us with the clearest insight to what happened in the hours leading up to Emilie's disappearance. They departed the train at around 3:53 a.m. at Korsør train station. Whilst making their way to the exit, they talked about their plans to call a taxi and all chip in for the fare together. Whilst waiting for the taxi, Emilie made it clear that she wanted to walk home alone. She explained that it was just down the gravel path and it wouldn't take her long whatsoever. Did Emilie want to walk down the path at 4 a.m. alone to clear her head? Had the messages she received upset her so much that she needed some time alone? Or did she receive a message from someone asking her to meet them down the gravel path? Did this person have cruel intentions? Despite her friends protesting and desperate pleas, Emilie was adamant that she would make the short walk down the gravel path to her home. There wasn't really much her friends could do, and they couldn't force her to take a taxi. So, after all, Cusar was a safe and quiet community. At 4 a.m, the friends said their goodbyes littered with promises of see you later and plans for the future. The last confirmed sighting of 17-year-old Emilie Meng was at 4 a.m. outside Cusar train station. Her friends watched her walk down the gravel path towards her home for the last time. Morning broke, bringing in Sunday 10th of July 2016. For the first few hours, the Meng household seemed normal. This was until Emilie's mother peered into her daughter's bedroom, only to find it empty. This wasn't an immediate cause for concern. Her mother thought that perhaps she had stayed over at a friend's house and forgot to tell them. Emilie was due to arrive at choir practice at the St. Paul's Church at 9:30 a.m. on the Sunday 10th of July. When her mother called to see if Emilie had perhaps gone straight there, that's when the nightmare for the Meng family began. Emilie had failed to turn up to choir practice, and none of her friends had seen her since 4 a.m. As we know, the last time that anyone saw Emilie was at 4 a.m. that morning. There are a few accounts of people hearing screams and male voices, but these are something that I will get into later, as they've never been confirmed to be linked to Emilie, at least never by the police. When Emilie's parents realised that she hadn't turned up at church and her phone was off, they called the police. Within hours, Emilie had been officially reported missing, and her family utilised media outlets to get the word out. By Monday, July 11th, 2016, over 200 volunteers, search and rescue dogs, divers, and even a helicopter were all out searching for 17-year-old Emilie. Sadly, there was heavy rain that day, meaning that the helicopter had to retire from the search. The people on the ground soon followed suit, and the search was called off until the following day of July 12th, 2016. Now, at this point, Emilie had officially been reported missing. Her family had filed a report, but the police were more treating Emilie as a runaway and not an actual missing person. During this time, her friends brought up the fact that her boyfriend had broken up with her on the Saturday before, so this was apparently the police's reasoning as to why Emilie had run away. Emilie had run away to Copenhagen a few times before, but had always resurfaced after a few hours. Her phone had also allegedly been turned off shortly after she left her friends at 4 a.m. on Sunday, July 10th, 2016. But then something strange began to happen. Friends were frantically sending her messages, praying that she would reply, and the whole ordeal would be over. Instead, Facebook Messenger was showing that Emilie had seen the messages, meaning that she had to be active or online. What's even weirder is that the police straight up deny the fact that this means Emilie was alive or on her phone. At this point, it feels like the police know a lot more than they're letting on. If her phone had been turned off shortly after 4 a.m, why had it been turned on again? Had her phone never been turned off at 4 a.m, and were the police just lying to cover an incompetence? As you will see, Emilie's case was mishandled and bungled from the start, which is a huge source of anger for the Danish people. Over July 13th and 14th, 2016, the search continued, with numerous lakes and bodies of water being searched for the missing 17-year-old. Her family make a heartbreaking appeal to anyone with information to come forward, and also set up a fundraiser to provide a cash reward for anyone who comes forward. By July 16th, 2016, police are still without a single shred of evidence. It seems that 17-year-old Emilie Meng vanished into thin air. She vanished from a place where crime is a rarity and murders are just so few and far between. At this point, most of Cusar had been thoroughly searched, and they have interviewed several witnesses and Emilie's friends, but still, nothing comes up. It's one thing for a person to go missing, but then for them to go missing without a single piece of evidence of a struggle is hard to comprehend. That is, of course, unless Emilie knew the person who was responsible for her disappearance. If she knew this person, she would be less likely to put up a fight as she felt comfortable encountering them down the dark gravel path at 4 a.m. Friday, July 22nd, 2016 brings a disturbing discovery. One of the search dogs returns to its handler with blood all over its nose and its paws. The blood could be from an animal, but when you are dealing with a missing 17-year-old, the discovery of blood is never a good sign. So they send out the dog again, but nothing comes of this. Why the dog returned in blood, covered in blood, is a mystery unto itself. The investigation continues into autumn of 2016, and a few false sightings of Emilie are reported in Cusor and other nearby towns. Also, belongings found at the Cusor train station car park are handed over to the police. The items handed over look like they could have fallen out of a girl's handbag, but police are not very forthcoming and don't tell the press anything. Autumn rolls slowly in and the Meng family are left devastated. Emilie should have been returning to school, but her friends and teachers start the school year without her. There's an empty desk, one less student in the classroom, and one spare seat at dinner, providing a bleak reminder to all those close to Emilie of their loss. The next big update doesn't come until October 14th, 2016, and I cannot even begin to imagine how agonising the wait must have felt for her family and friends. The house of a 67-year-old man was searched, as there were rumours that he had been involved in holding Emilie captive. Again, nothing comes of this, the man is cleared of any involvement, and Emilie's case grows cold once again. 3 days later, on October 17th, 2016, an arrest is made and the whole of Denmark waits with bated breath. It seems that police have finally made a breakthrough, and Emilie's friends and family will have the answers they deserve. But they never come. A 33-year-old man, whose name I will not reveal for reasons that become quite obvious in a moment, was charged with Emilie's murder and held in the police station for questioning. After a lengthy and vigorous interrogation, the 33-year-old man is released as police determine that he is innocent and has nothing to do with the disappearance of Emilie Meng, which is why I didn't mention his name. This arrest came after an anonymous tip-off from a, quote, concerned citizen. If you'll recall, a 67-year-old man's house was also searched, and it seems like someone also made a report about him. Are these personal vendettas and smear campaigns? Were these legitimate concerns that neighbours had? Or was this an attempt by Emilie's kidnapper to throw off the scent of the investigation? Police searched 2 more homes on October 24th, 2016. One of these houses has already been searched before and is the home of a 67-year-old man. I will leave the name out of this episode as he has been cleared of any involvement and police have no new evidence to suspect that he is part of Emilie's disappearance. The 67-year-old man also speaks to his lawyer and the press, reporting that he has been the victim of wiretapping and surveillance by the local police. He claims that these were illegal as police had no evidence that Emilie had ever been held at his address, and feels that he was the victim of a targeted attack. After all is said and done, police reiterate to the press that neither of the men have anything to do with Emilie's disappearance. There's a quote in a press conference, and it said there is no evidence that Emilie Meng has stayed at the address which has been searched several times. October, November, and December plod on with no further updates. Police are desperately searching and the pressure is mounting. Not only from Emilie's family, but from the Danish people. As I said before, Denmark is known to be a very peaceful and safe place, and this is really the crime that shook Denmark. People begin to think twice about letting their children walk home, or even go out, and not just change the community of Korsør forever, but I think it changed the perspective of the Danish people forever. At 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve 2016, a man and his dog are walking near the Renegades Backy Lake. Convinced that he can see something in the water, he moves in closer, only for his worst fears to be confirmed. The dog walker had found the body of 17-year-old Emilie Meng, who had been missing since July 10th, 2016. Official confirmation doesn't come until Christmas Day 2016. The Meng family have to spend Christmas finding out that the body found floating in the lake was their darling Emilie. When news begins to spread, Korsør and even the whole of Denmark are heartbroken. This is the conclusion that nobody wanted, but many had secretly held in the back of their minds. The whole nation was shattered, and it seemed that the whole nation went into a period of mourning. The Renegades Backy Lake is 37 miles from Korsør train station, where Emilie was last seen at 4 a.m. So how had she gotten there? Had she been kidnapped and brought to the area, killed and then dumped? Or had her murder occurred in Korsør and her killer brought her far away in the hopes that she would never be found? A common theme that you will see throughout the rest of this case is that the police are not very forthcoming, and even at the press conference addressing the discovery of Emilie, they do not reveal how she died. All they say is that they believe she was killed either the day of her disappearance or very soon after. Just a day later, so Boxing Day, the locals of Korsør and other surrounding towns and villages all gathered outside of Korsør train station in a candlelit vigil to commemorate Emilie's life and mourn her passing. The mayor of Skagelsk, the town where she spent her last day alive, even came to the vigil and marked his respect. To say that Emilie's murder shook Denmark is an understatement. Over the Christmas and New Year period, there were a number of different gatherings and vigils held in Emilie's honour. One vigil even had 2,500 people turn up. On January 5th, 2017, the head teacher of the Skagelsk Gymnasium, which is a local school, organised a memorial service at the school for all of the children to attend and pay their respects. He told TV OST, quote, "Now, we are a fairly large school with 1,200 students, and I have rarely experienced that it is as quiet as it is today." End quote. Emilie Meng was finally laid to rest after being missing for 5 months and then being found deceased on January 19th, 2017. Her funeral was held at the St. Paul's Church, where she sang in the choir and was due to attend the day she went missing. Again, after this, the case goes quiet and police are not releasing anything. They're searching multiple different areas in Korsør and beyond, but insist that they've found nothing and there's nothing new to add to the information that's already public. That is until June 20th, 2017, when they appeal for any information about a car that was seen at the train station around the same time that Emilie was last seen. The car is described as being a white Hyundai i30 model 2011 to 2016, or something that does look very similar. At some point around July of 2017, the Danish public and media outlets began voicing their criticisms of the investigation into Emilie's disappearance. It's revealed at first police only ran with the theory that she had run away to Copenhagen and didn't really give much credence to the fact that something could be wrong. The first 24 to 48 hours of investigation are crucial, and even more so when we're dealing with a missing child, and it's definitely not the first time that we've seen police brush off a missing teenager. An article written for Berlingske.dk by Henrik Jensen in October 2019 goes into further detail about how botched the investigation was. According to the Meng's family lawyer, May-Britt Storm Theisten, during the time that Emilie had gone missing, there were police on holiday, which meant that the stations were at a reduced capacity. Quote, "We received some explanations that you were initially hit by summer vacation down in the police district. There were not all the resources that needed to be, and there was a relatively shifting crew in relation to who was standing and wearing the driver's hat. Both my family and I have experienced this as a problem in relation to the things that were done and not done at the time." And that is a quote from the Meng family on through their lawyer. If these allegations are true, it seems that the Kassar police station was not running at a full capacity, and they had not bothered to draft in extra men from other stations to assist. To add to the issue of manpower, it's also transpired that several witnesses were not interviewed in the hours and days after Emilie had been reported missing. A man who was at the train station at the time that Emilie went missing was not questioned. He had to come forward himself in 2019, which is 3 years after she had gone missing, in order to get the police to question him. He had made previous attempts, but it seemed that the police were just too busy or not interested, so it took him coming forward and going to the press and telling them. And then it's 3 years, and we all know that human memory isn't as good as we think it is. The taxi driver who drove the other 3 girls home was not questioned until 3 months after the fact. The human brain and memory are not the most reliable things, which is why witness testimony alone is not enough in a court of law. Memories are extremely unreliable and can hold strong biases, or your brain can do this really fun thing where it fills in the gaps with false information, where it can't quite remember what happened, which is why if 2 people experience the same event, they will have slightly differing accounts of what happened. So asking a taxi driver 3 months after the fact wouldn't have been very useful to anyone. If anything, he should have been one of the first to be questioned. And again, police failed to act fast enough and retrieve CCTV footage from the train station and the surrounding areas. As a rule of thumb, most recordings are kept for about a month and deleted unless they are backed up and stored for a reason. So when the police finally decided to get around to looking at the tapes, poof, they were gone. They didn't even bother to look at the CCTV footage from a camera that faced onto the road towards the lake where Emilie was found. The pressure and criticism was so bad that the police had to release an official statement about Emilie's investigation, and I'm going to read that for you now. So it starts off with saying, "It is true that the police, on the basis of the information available at the time, in the very initial phase assessed that the case was about a search case. This meant that certain investigative steps were not taken in the start-up phase, which would have happened if we had assessed the case differently. There should be no doubt that we take the Emilie Meng case very seriously. We have devoted extensive resources to the investigation, and we are doing everything that we can to find the perpetrator behind a very tragic crime. As the investigation is still ongoing, we find it most appropriate not to participate in interviews, example because a perpetrator can benefit from detailed information about where we stand in the investigation. Information that can give the perpetrator insight into our investigation will therefore, in the worst case, make it even more difficult for him." Emilie's mother, Helen, told Belensk.dk, quote, "There's really a lot of anger. Of course, first and foremost against him who has done this and ruined Emilie's lives and our lives. Of course, secondarily to the police, because they have wasted so much on this. The perpetrator might have been found today if they had done their job properly." End quote. Remember how I had said that there were witnesses who heard screams? Well, I found an article from June of 2020 that talks about the book called Emilie Meng, The Mystery, The Girl Who Disappeared, written by Bo Nordstrom-Well and Jesper Vestgaard Larsen. Whilst I haven't read the book myself, I have tried to find a copy in English. I've sent a couple of emails to the authors, but it appears it's only available in Danish at the moment, and clearly I don't speak Danish. The article details how the book contains accounts from 2 witnesses who heard something that night. One of the accounts come from a young woman whose name has not been released. She tells the authors that she was living near the gravel path where Emilie walked at 4 a.m. on the day she went missing. And in the article it says, "It was the early morning hours that the young woman was awakened by what she describes in the book as a loud, shrill scream, emitted by the full force of the lungs. Immediately after she heard a male voice, but couldn't make out what was being said." The witness approached the police as soon as she had learnt that Emilie had gone missing down the gravel path the night before, but in her own words, she was swept off the field. The police didn't seem to want to have anything to do with her and didn't want to take her account. There is another account by a young man who lived near the gravel path too. He is described as being developmentally disabled and living in a group home, but I'm not really sure what bearing this has on his account. He said, quote, "A girl, I heard her well at night. She screamed." Again, this account was brushed off by police, perhaps more so due to his disabilities and a lot of prejudice from the police. Emilie's case seems to have been bungled from the start, where the police just didn't know how to deal with such a case, or they just didn't have the manpower. Errors were made, and sadly lessons have hopefully been learnt. Lessons that should have been learnt by a police force in 2016. Police should not be learning these lessons now. The most recent update in Emilie's case that I can find comes from June of 2020, again from the berlinsk.dk website. Police have taken a new angle, thank God, and they've started to obtain DNA samples from all males in the area near where she was found. This seems like a step in the right direction, but after 4 years, it's possible that her killer is long gone. And they've also not factored in that her killer could be female. A docu-series that aired on Danish TV put forward that Emilie's killer could in fact be a woman. With a lack of information to her cause of death, and any information about sexual assault being withheld, we could be dealing with a different kind of evil. Of course, it's possible that police do know this information, and are in fact just keeping it hidden to preserve the integrity of the case. I can't personally see why they would start getting DNA profiles of men in the area. If they didn't have something to compare it to, it would be pointless if they didn't have like a probable cause. But who knows? In 2020, the residents of the quiet town of Borup, near the lake where Emilie was found, still live in fear. In 2016, 15-year-old Saima Ali gave an interview to a Danish TV programme and explained that she was scared to walk, even during the daytime. She said, "When it has come so close, you are a little more scared, and your parents are a little more sceptical. You think about an extra time of where you go and who you go with. You think that Borup is a small town. You know a lot of people here, so you're safe when you walk around here. But now it has come so close, you are a little more scared." Another resident by the name of Dorothy Hartfeld said in the same interview, "It's very close. The thoughts are very much in who it is. If there were more about it. Where it is. Who it is. Is there one in our area? Does anyone live nearby? Is it a passerby who was panicked and just thrown?" A lot of thought goes into it. Whilst police have received hundreds upon thousands of tips and inquiries from members of the public, they're still no closer to finding the monster who killed 17-year-old Emilie Meng. Emilie's family are heartbroken and have to live each day knowing that the person responsible is still free. Whilst the person who did this will be hit with the full extent of the law, when you think about it, it's the Meng family who are really serving the life sentence. Emilie will never get to graduate school. She'll never enroll at university. She'll never start her first job, or get to meet her future partner, or start a family. Emilie and her family have been deprived of the rest of her life. She was just 17 years old when she was taken from us, and she was just days away from turning 18. She was days away from starting that transition to adulthood. If you have any information about the murder of Emilie Meng, you are urged to contact the South Zealand and Lowland Forster Police Department on +45 55 31 1448. You can also email them, and the email is ssj@polity.dk. I will put all of the contact information in the show notes, as always. And that was the case of Emilie Meng, and it was extremely frustrating to research and write, because the deeper you go, you just find more incompetencies. It's very frustrating, so hopefully this new DNA gathering will finally bring some hope to the community and her family. So as always, if there are any updates, I will be the one to bring them to you. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As always, you can find me on all social media. Just search for True Crime Witch. I'm on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just search True Crime Witch and I'm sure I'll come up. Remember, friends, stay safe and stay spooky.